you guys all today. I have got a dead set, fair income, proper good, actually moving, touching, deep, honest, running out of adjectives, but magnificent interview. The issue that we covered off on was a very delicate one. So I suppose I should genuinely give a trigger warning. I spoke to Kelly Humphries, who was who suffered long-term child abuse at the hands of her uncle. So we discussed some pretty delicate issues in regards to this. So if this is something that is going to upset you, I do suggest that you, although I do want people to listen, I do suggest that you use your discretion when it comes to listening, although it's a very upbeat interview. If you do listen and you do find yourself upset by it, I'm going to put Kelly's website on all the chats, so that she's got all the contact details for the people that you should contact if this is something that deeply upsets you. But the question basically we kind of discussed was, how can anything good come from child abuse? As I said, Kelly endured long-term abuse from her uncle, and yet she has channeled it into something very positive. So if you're interested in her story and how she came through, in the nature of forgiveness, which is a really deep conversation that we had, and how positive things can come from the worst situations, you're really going to enjoy this interview, and I commend it to you. Kel is a dead set legend, actually. I enjoyed speaking to her so much. She told it the way it is. She's a proper country girl, proper bully woman. She's a copper through and through. So without further ado, I'll put this one on. Please like, please share. If you haven't already done so, follow Northern Vibe on Facebook and YouTube. Check out the channel for really interesting interviews with people who've achieved in their fields. Look, I've spoken to so many cool people. I've spoken to national, international academics. I've spoken to Olympians, artists, musicians, filmmakers, writers, survivors of serious illness, law enforcement, civil libertarians, UFO watchers, sex workers, you name it. I have spoken to them, and their stories are on Northern Vibe. So please check it out. And I promise you, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, my jammed heart, you will not be disappointed. I'm not sponsored, and I have no agenda other than cultivating curiosity. So enough from me. Let's hear from the magnificent Kelly.
All right, mate. Well, I'm very happy to be here, very happy to be chatting. We've already been talking for way longer than I thought we would, but, you know, it's a surprise. Look at you, mate.
Well, you know, people use phrases like disruptive influence when describing you, Humphries, and I'm sure that they've used the same with me. So disruptive influences together, it's disruptive influence squared. It was always going to end up this way, really, wasn't it?
Oh, look, it's good. And it's actually really good to be able to speak. I loved having like these really raw, unfiltered, uncut, off the cuff. Like, let's see what happens.
Yeah. There's a 466 coming our way.
Oh God, no.
To Northern
But
Vibe.
yeah, look,
I'm really happy to see you
probably.
guys all today.
Let's go.
No, but all guests aside, I'm going to have to come in and say, you're kind of amazing. Like, the life that you have lived and the contributions that, you know, the serious trials and tribulations that you've gone through, overcome and contributed and written about it, are kind of amazing. So for those people who unfortunately, you know, don't know much about you and who you are in your background, would you mind just telling us who you are and, you know, why you're here and what you've got to contribute? And don't be who you are and, you know, modest. Why you're here and
all right, so I should just get my book out and start reading, shall I? No, look, I appreciate that, and yeah, it is hard to talk about some of those things because we don't often want to kind of brag, I guess, and I don't really do that as such, because I kind of, and it's a bit unfortunate because what I tend to do, and this is my coping mechanism, is I kind of just dig in and I don't think, I just do, right? And so I often kind of don't think about what's happened to get here. But I know myself, I'm starting to look back and go, actually, you're doing all right, Humphries. You're doing all right. Like, you know, because it definitely hasn't been easy. Like I grew up in the bush, you know, outback, central Queensland, in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have much growing up, you know. We sort of, you know, my mum was quite young when she had me, and you know, didn't start out very well, I suppose, but we started out with love, and we started out with, you know, being bush kids and chucking things around and hurdling barbed wire fences, and, you know, my brother and I punching the shit out of each other in the front yard, and as you do, you know, so many times we just throwing cow shit at each other, and just, but that was fun. Like, they're the moments that you kind of like think, fuck, I hate my brother. Like, but I don't. I love the shit out of my brother. And you know, when the shit's kind of hitting the fan, and stuff's going on, you're like holding on to those moments, and you don't realize how important those real simple things, you know, the simple things, like I remember the campfire and mum making bread, and those types of things as being some of the most beautiful moments in my life, because when things are going bad, that's kind of the stuff that brings you home. And you know, we had beautiful people around us growing up. We had lots of external friends and family, and my uncle was a very big person in our life. He was very close to us, and what we didn't realize was he was grooming me, grooming my family, and he started to sexually abuse me from the age of 8. So that happened from 8 up until I was 15, and continued sporadically, I guess, when we saw each other. You know, it started off while I was at his house, and I was getting babysat kind of thing, while mum and dad went and did groceries and did what they did on a Thursday night, and sort of came into the bedroom, and that was that. The night was that night, and then again the next morning, and then that was it. And we hadn't had that conversation about protective behaviors, and, you know, this is your penis, this is your vagina, this is what happens when you're scared. You know, there was no sort of a language around it at that point in time, so I didn't kind of know what to say, and it was very confusing, because he was, you know, we all loved our uncle, and so no one's at the moment, no one's really talking a lot about intrafamilial abuse, and you know, that's kind of what my passion is now, obviously. But yeah, it was a very difficult, dark space to be kind of walking through as a young child, and I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know who to share that with, and so I kind of kept that secret until I was 19. And I was a very good athlete, luckily. I was a great track and field athlete. I kind of threw myself into everything. Australian level for many different sports, traveled internationally. I went to Fairholme College in Toowoomba as a young lady in grade 11 and 12, and got myself an athletics scholarship. So that was amazing, because it meant I got away from him, right? The last incident with him was when I was 15, and it was just like a big showdown at the OK Corral. You know, it was probably one of the bravest moments I've ever had. And I've had, you'd know, as a police officer, Matt, like how many scary moments you can count in your career where you've had guys come at you with, you know, pieces of wood, blocks of timber. You know, it still wasn't as scary as that moment that I had this showdown with my uncle, and I didn't know if I was going to live or die, or if he would finally snap, and that would be the moment that, you know, he finally killed me. You know, he was a very strong guy, like, and look, he never ever said he was going to kill me. It was just my internal fear as a child, as a young woman, not knowing what he was going to do, right? So in that moment, me saying, fuck you, get the fuck away from me, don't fucking touch me. And I did. I ripped it. I punched him in the chest. I kicked him. It was like, it was just something I never saw myself, something I see myself doing in my head, but thinking I'd never have the courage to stand up against him, you know. And I was so scared. And I remember not so long ago, I had an incident with an offender who came at me with a baseball bat and in one hand, and a sledgehammer in the other. And I thought, shit, but the whole world shut down. I did exactly what I was trained to do. And the difference between that moment and the moment that I had facing up to my uncle was that I didn't have the training.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what to do with that guy. I knew exactly that I had all the tools at my disposal. But when I was a 15-year-old girl or an 8-year-old little girl, I didn't have any of those tools. And it wasn't my parents' fault. It wasn't anyone's fault except the perpetrators. But that's why I spend so much of my time advocating and talking about protective behaviors and saying how we need to be educating our kids, because I didn't have that language. I didn't have those tools, right? And I think it's such a profound, and I didn't really even think about that till now. That's the first time I've said it like that. So that's pretty cool. But, you know, I ended up going over to America. I got a scholarship overseas. I did some amazing stuff. I traveled around America competing. You know, like I did all this stuff because I was finally able to set myself free. And that was so big. When I was 19, I disclosed to my a sports coach. This is before I went overseas, and yeah, she helped me to talk to one of the school counselors, and I was out of school at this point, but I was still working in the school. And yeah, we went and talked to the police, and they were actually brilliant. I say actually brilliant. They're always great, and you talk to the right person. And you know, they did a fantastic job. My uncle was charged, convicted, and I can't comment too much on my thoughts around the court system, but he was sentenced to 4 years to serve only 18 months, or less than 18 months actually. And there's a lot around that I still kind of haven't dealt with, but it's never going to be enough. And I know that that is never going to be enough for us. And I say that with a double entendre because I know I'm not the only one, not the only one who has been offended against by my perpetrator. So, you know, it's difficult because I know that there are others, and I can't change that. But I can change how it looks for other people, which is why I spend my time advocating now. I've written a book. I've written my own story called Unscathed Beauty. And you can find that on my website at kellyhumphries.com. And I know I haven't, oh, look at you, Matt. You're all over it.
Like a rash.
Like a rash, he says. Yeah, so that's my website. Matt's just chucking up there. But yeah, I'm supported of Bravehearts. I'm an ambassador for them as well, and I spend a lot of time supporting other agencies with my work. Just being a survivor, I've got a fairly good hat that I wear. I've got obviously my lived experience, plus I've been in the police now for 15 years. So I try my hardest now to, I guess, make a change where there hasn't really been a lot of change. And I know survivors have been speaking up for years. But, you know, I feel like sometimes their voices are not really getting heard. And to be heard is to be understood, and there's to be actual change. And that's the thing, you know, there's a lot of voices being spoken out, but we're not really seeing the changes, I think, that need to happen. And, you know, it's slow going. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of pain. So I try to be that voice for those who haven't been able to have their voice yet, if that makes sense. So
it makes total sense.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about what I do. Well, that's my story basically in a nutshell. There's a lot that's happened between then and now, but you know, that's why I do what I do.
Well, mate, and it's bloody dead set, you know. Better than true God heaven, mate. It's pretty cool. Inspirational, actually. I don't want to get yeah, but there we go. But mate, why the coppers? Like, you know, without, so you had all this, so you're winning overseas scholarships.
Oh yeah. So
it's like, well, you know, why? You know, no disrespect to myself or any of our former colleagues, any of our colleagues, like, would you join the police? Like, oh, why would you do that? Like, what?
Yeah, look, you know, it's not all bad. To be honest, it was.
It's not all bad.
I don't know, mostly. I lived in a small town growing up in Barora, and we had the most beautiful adopter cops, to be honest. We had the most wonderful community coppers, and they were like very good role models, I guess. Kind of growing up, we had these guys that we could just kind of chat to that were just really laid back, and so there was that, and then there was the fact that they did such a good job with my investigation. I thought, well, I could do that. And I've always had this like helping kind of thing in me, like I just want to make a difference. And when I came back from the US, I was trying to make the Commonwealth Games actually, and I busted out and had injuries and all that sort of stuff, and it just didn't work. And then I joined the police, and it's kind of hard to do both at the same time, so it just kind of didn't happen. But I don't know, I just wanted to make a difference, and being a police officer I thought was a pretty good way. Like it took me a bit to get in. I've got a bit of a hearing loss, so I had to kind of take care of that first, and then I got myself in, and I've been in 15 years now, so still there, still going. But looking at my options currently, because this advocacy work is so important, and there's so much that needs to happen in this space, and I just feel like it's kind of my responsibility, like to step up now. I've made this path for myself, and there's a lot of beautiful people that I'm working with and collaborating with to make changes, and I really want to keep doing that. So we'll see. We'll watching this space. But yeah, I do.
Well, we will with interest, and I'd be interested in hearing the practical things in so much as you can discuss them. But you have an excellent quote. Through my journey, I have come to realize that there are some things about the human condition that no one can take away from you. It is about spirit, our core, and the innermost thing that makes us who we are. Please discuss.
Please discuss. Oh my goodness. Well, I kind of look at who we are, and I kind of think about the fact that you just have to kind of look around you, Matt. Like, yourself, like you see adversity all the time, right? You see people struggle and climb and wrestle and crawl and scream and cry, and like, in absolute human desperation. There's so much going on, but in spite of all of that, we all make it most of the time. We all get through. We find that thing in ourselves, and we push our way out, and we crawl our way out, and we find that courage that we often don't think we have. We often don't think we have courage. Like I think about my journey through child abuse, and I think about every single moment I had to have courage, and every single moment that he touched me, and every single moment that I was confused, and even as a little child, and you just crawl your way out, and no one can take that part of you away, right? No one can steal that from you. No one can steal that beautiful, like, heart-driven, soul-driven, courageous part of you that always fights. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one can steal that from you. And it's the thing that we forget that we have when we're sometimes rock bottom and we're thinking, I can't do this anymore. But you can. And sometimes you just need a little bit of a kick in the ass from a good mate, or sometimes it takes having those people in your community and around you that can just kind of remind you of why that's important.
You don't have to agree with this, but something that I've found is that, ironically, terrible pain and suffering can actually have some really positive effects, in so much as that, like, as you've indicated, it shows that you had character that you didn't know that you had, abilities that you didn't know you had, and strength that you didn't know you had. And that's not to say that it's all positive, but I think there's a positive side to suffering. Would you mind discussing that? So much.
Well, I think that we don't want to go through suffering because it hurts and it's uncomfortable. But I think some of us actually enjoy being there, right? Because it's what we know. And it's kind of actually what happens with trauma. And I mean, I'm probably going to indirectly answer your question, I suppose. But what I have found through my experience and through working with survivors of abuse is that that's all we kind of know, right? And so we exist in this space of chaos and sadness and trauma and things not going right. We expect things to go wrong all the time, right? Because they haven't really gone right before. So why should they go right now? So what ended up happening is, we start making progress. We meet someone really cool, or we get this really cool opportunity in our life, and we start kind of moving towards that, where we think, oh shit, this is going really well. This is fantastic. And you're like, something's wrong here. Something is really wrong here. So what we do is we sabotage the shit out of it because we do not think we fucking deserve it. We do not think in our human condition that we deserve to be loved, that we deserve to feel safe, that we deserve to grow, that we deserve to have this amazing career, to step outside of our comfort zone and just like to thrive, to fly, to find this freedom because I'm a dirty little girl, or I did this thing, or I don't deserve this because I just isn't, I deserve to suffer. I deserve to stay here. And it's not a conscious thought, right? It's a subconscious condition that we stay in because it's what we think we deserve, but it's fucking not true. It's not true. You deserve to be fully loved and fully, just you matter so much, and you don't realize the impact that you can have on people around you and life and love and connection and even the things you think that can't be changed. Like you can start such the biggest ripple effect by just allowing yourself to be loved and go through that. So you still have to go through suffering. Like you might want to stay in suffering, but you've got to go through the suffering and the frustration and the hard stuff and be really fucking uncomfortable to move through that to get to the other side, to that freedom part, right? So yeah, it doesn't matter what you choose, you're still gonna have that hard kind of road, right? But you've got to do that work, and you've got to kind of go through that process to work out, yeah, well, I do matter and I do deserve this. Do you know what I mean? Does that answer?
Totally. You have to walk through the dark to appreciate the light.
Yeah, you do. But then also to stay there. Like, I mean, things are going to come up for you.
Yeah.
But when you start to work on your healing, and I'm writing healing courses for trauma survivors right now. So I've done quite a bit of work recently on these triggers and like being stuck in the cycle and that sort of stuff. Is not looking at it so much as like this mountain you've got to climb, but as a stepping stone in your everyday walk, so that when you're moving through your day to day, it's not like, oh my God, this thing's happened and you disappear off the face of the earth for 3 weeks because you just can't cope. Right. And instead of it being such a big thing, it's like, all right, this thing's popped up. Take this, really deep breath and go, okay, cool. What's in my toolkit? What are my strategies? And you just kind of one little bite at a time and you just move through it. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm good with that. And then you get through it. And it's just like, you just got a traffic ticket from some copper, or you know what I mean, like it's just a thing. It's
you think it defines you, because like and that works at so many different levels, because someone does something wrong or they make a mistake or whatever it is, and you see this communally too, in societies, and understandably you actually have to be a decent person to kind of like consider this. It's like you think, oh well, that's definitive.
That's it. Or you get stuck with a label and you're like, oh, well, that's it. I just have to conform to that label, instead of going, okay, hang on, there's more to me than this.
Yeah.
And really pushing through that and going, hey, you know what? I've got so much. This is not just one, this is not the whole part of me. This is only a little part of me, but we try to separate our past and our trauma and stuff away from us to make it something that's not really part of us. And it's just a thing that happened and we bury it. And we try to live a separate life to our past, and you can't do that because
I think it's deeper than that, Caroline. Because like you've got qualifications in this besides live.
I don't know about that. I've got life qualification, maybe.
Oh, you got you're green
slight degree in shit, but yeah, no, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, but so like again, here's the self-depreciation thing going on here. I think it's deeper than that. I think that people don't want to forgive themselves.
No, they don't. They've got to have something to hold on to.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want to forgive themselves because they don't also know what it's like to be on the other side of that. Change is hard, right? But I think a lot of people get caught up in this whole forgiveness thing, right? you know, a lot of people say, oh, you've got to forgive to move on. And I don't know if I agree with that, but I do think you must forgive yourself. And that's the hardest part. And it's not just forgiving yourself. Like when if we're talking about child abuse and child trauma and things like that, it's a little bit different. We're working with like the inner person, the inner child, the young person inside of us, and having to go back to a place where, because what we do, right, adults in trauma, and this might sound something, some people may agree with me or may not agree with me, but when we're in that place of trauma as an adult, we often revert back to childlike behaviors. We think like the child that we were, we act like the child that we were, we base decisions, and we go back to our default wiring and the coping mechanisms that we developed as a child who was in trauma, right? So unless we've done the work between, you know, then when things were happening to now as an adult, we don't have those pathways. We don't have those systems in place for us to go, okay, hang on, I've got this toolkit. This has happened. This is how I'm going to deal with it, right? We just go back to how we did as a child. A perfect example, myself, I disassociate, right? And it's varying degrees, like, and for those who don't know what disassociation is, it's basically how you kind of can separate yourself from your body so that you're not physically present in your body, so that whatever's happening at that time or that stress that you're kind of dealing with doesn't basically affect you so much. It's your body's natural way of coping, and in order to deal with it, the trauma that you're experiencing. So as a child, that's the defense mechanism, or I guess the coping strategy that I developed. And now as an adult, I can disassociate like a boss. I can switch off. I can deal with anything, right? But it's not healthy, and I know that. And, you know, that's something that I have been working on for a long time. So, you know, to deal with that, it's like grounding strategies and all that sort of stuff. You just have to find another way to wire your brain, and that takes consistency. It takes repetition. It takes discipline and commitment to your healing. You know, so you're absolutely right. Like, we do hold on to stuff. We have a way that we deal with things because of how our traumas have manifested. And unless we are committed and willing to do the work to get better, to heal ourselves, to get through this like kind of like sand that we have to walk through, then things don't change. Nothing changes if nothing changes, right?
So I agree without qualification to anything you just no. But like, there's one thing that genuinely intrigues me. What do you mean when you say forgiveness?
Well, I guess no one's really asked me that, but I think forgiving is kind of like taking the blame away from yourself, and you didn't do this. And I think a lot of people, and again, we're still talking about child abuse. When I'm referring to this, I'm talking about child abuse mostly, but, you know, this will have parallels with, you know, other people have experienced different types of trauma and things like that, is perpetrators. And if you're someone who's experiencing domestic and family violence, you know, maybe in a position where it's an emotionally abusive relationship. Now, I believe there's a direct correlation between those who are in emotionally abusive relationships, and I think there's a very high percentage of males and females who've had child abuse experiences who are in those relationships because they haven't done the work. And it's about trauma bonding, and you connect with those people later in life because it's what you know. And that's meaning no disrespect. It's just what we do when we find people that are like us and we connect with them. But when two people are together who haven't done the work, it often results in a lot of emotional projection. You may love the shit out of each other, but you've got all these things that you need to work on together. But what happens is emotional or grooming behavior. So grooming is when someone like manipulates and tricks you, and grooming by tradition and by definition is when a perpetrator targets a child or a family in order to have sexual access to a child, right? And they do that in lots of different ways, as you know, Matt, with your, you know, long extensive history being a police officer. You know, they target, they manipulate, they coerce, they trick, and they gaslight, and they do everything that they can to form this connection and this bond with this child. And then they start to isolate them from their family, and then they start to commit sexual offenses against the child, right? It makes them think that they can't talk to their family and all that sort of stuff. And within that, they find ways to get the child to believe that what's happening is because the child even wanted it.
Yeah.
The child, made it happen. The child, said you wanted this, or you like this, or something or other that, and it may be very triggering for anyone who's listening to this, but this is what a perpetrator will do to create a cycle of shame and self-blame in a victim child so that they stay silent and the offending can continue, if that makes sense, right? So when I talk about self-forgiveness, and I talk about self-forgiveness as an adult, we're going back to those moments where we've been taught that this is our fault, but it's not, right? This is tactics that are used by perpetrators to continue to offend against the child, right? To keep them silent, to keep the offending happening. We have to unlearn that in our brain. We have to accept that this wasn't our fault. And this is so complex, man. And I'm hoping that you're with me still, but
Oh, I am. Totally.
When we're talking about familial abuse, it gets even more complicated. And we know from the statistics that 89% of offenders are known to the child, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And then
stranger danger. I had to smash that out of people. It's stranger danger. That's
right. Exactly. It's people who are known to us. And when we're talking about a child who's in a relationship or the perpetrator is sexually offending against someone who's in their family, like, it makes that dynamic even harder because it's then so confusing, right? So how can you break this intrafamilial abuse cycle if the child doesn't know how to talk about it, if the child has no toolkit, if the child has no ability to just have these conversations and have them in a safe place, right? We need to be cultivating these safe places. And I'm so passionate about this because I know what the adult effects of this. I mean, I'm an adult survivor who's had to battle through all this shit. So I can tell you this shit, right? So, and I choose to do that because it makes a difference. And, this self-forgiveness stuff, it is just so problematic because it's been embedded. My child abuse was from 8 until 15, and I can't add up however many years that is. That's 7 years, 8 years of abuse and of me being told things that then make me believe that I hate myself, that I'm not worthy, that I feel disgusting, I hate who I am, all these things, which I know are not true because I'm a brilliant athlete. I'm quite smart. I've got a degree. I can write books. I can talk to people. I can stand on a stage. Like, I can do shit, right? But that little inner voice does not go away. And so I don't care so much about forgiving the offender, right? I care about forgiving myself and that child who was forced to believe those things, because a lot of people don't think that they can ever forgive the offender, and I'm never going to tell someone that they should or they shouldn't. But I will say you must work on forgiving yourself. You have to do that to set yourself free. You were never responsible for child abuse that was perpetrated against you. Could never give consent. Okay. Confusing or not, the person as an adult can make adult decisions and make adult choices. You're a child. You cannot make adult choices as a child. It's as simple as that. So if there's anyone out there that's holding any blame or any self-blame or think that it was ever their fault, was ever told by the perpetrator that it was their fault, I'm telling you right now, from someone who's got a lived experience and somebody who knows, it never was. It absolutely never was. And I just really encourage you to work on just forgiving yourself for ever thinking or believing that it was, because that's just not the case.
I concur with that qualification. There's actually, God, I have so many stories I could actually. I'll relay one quick anecdote just to validate what you were saying, more than anything else for the listeners. In the last few weeks that I was in the job, I went to these homeless people. They were hiding in this house that had been gutted, and there was this, and she was genuinely, and I don't say this lightly, it's like she was a very attractive woman who was there with this fella, and they'd stolen all these cameras and printers and stuff like that, and the whole place is full of stolen stuff. It's like turning up homeless places like you're walking around and stolen. And he had taken photographs of this woman and printed them all out, and they were round everywhere. And he was a grub. I was the sergeant, so I realised it pretty quickly. And I had some great coppers with me. I was like, okay, take that grub. Sorry, remove this offender. Take this offender into custody. Go down to the watch house, process him for this, this, and this. All right. So I'm talking to this woman in the corner, Cal, and she's so humiliated because the cops have walked in and she's seen, she knew that we saw these photographs and she's thinking that we're judging her. And believe me, I am in no position to, I recognize things that are wrong, but I don't do condemnation. So I judge in so much as this behavior is wrong, but I don't condemn. This is a very important distinction. And of course, this poor woman thought that, she was going to be condemned. But that wasn't the case. So, I'll get very quickly, and I kind of said to her, I go, why are you allowing this? This person loathes you, they're treating you like instrumentally. Why? Can I help you? Actually, sorry, I had the conversation before. It's like, can I help you? Blah, 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 blah. Person refused all this help. I just want to, so why? And she said, and she used my rank actually, which was a bit of an indication. Yes, well, Sarge, I deserve it.
Yeah, I've heard it too, Matt, and it kills me.
So many occasions. So that's just a validation of that. But I still want to talk about forgiveness, and in so much as I think, and I'm not asking for validation. Okay, say no. This is just what I think, and I want to know genuinely what you think. Forgiveness of offenders is not saying, hey, what you've done is okay, you should validate yourself, blah, blah, blah. That's none of those things. Forgiveness of someone who's done something terribly wrong to you is saying, I no longer hold that bitterness against you. It's not saying that I don't hold you responsible. It's not saying that you didn't do it. It's not saying any of these things. It's letting go of the bitterness. That's how I conceptualize forgiveness of offenders. Could you talk about that?
To be honest, I mean, if we're talking about my personal story, I don't know that I've actually really allowed myself to really think about that. I don't think that, I mean, I kind of, the things that I'm not ready to deal with, I just don't go there yet. And it was only not that long ago that, I sort of read the sentencing notes about the trial and what was sort of said. And, there was things that came out of that I was just like, how can that happen? And I learned a lot from reading that, a lot of stuff that I didn't like, and a lot of things that, because it was about the defense putting forward their emotions about him and the reasons the offending occurred. And I mean, I can't disclose those things publicly, but what those, I guess I saw them as kind of excuses, and I thought, like, how, I understand, I get that all offending comes from a place of trauma most of the time, right? And I have compassion and understanding for that, because but I only have compassion and understanding for people that once they recognize where these things come from, that they start to act in a way where they can learn to make a difference, or they start trying to make the changes, the positive changes in their life that they should be making, right? And when people aren't willing to be accountable and they continue to hurt people, even though they know and they're not doing the work, I can't forgive those people, right? Until they start to work on themselves. And I kind of think, I mean, I don't know enough. Once my uncle was convicted and charged, I've never spoken to him again, right? So I don't know what I kind of really think about my own forgiveness towards him, because I haven't really allowed myself to do that. But if we're going on your definition, I don't know that I have much bitterness towards him as much. Like that bitterness is not kind of there like it was. And potentially, you know, I've just numbed it out and I haven't dealt with it yet, or potentially, yes, I've maybe forgiven him, but I can't really answer that clearly.
Because, and look, there's nothing wrong with that, because there's this conceptualization that forgiveness is this magnanimous gesture that, like, you're saying to that person, you need not feel bad about what happened. I don't think that that's, and in fact, I know that that's not implicit in the conceptualization that I have of forgiveness. In fact, the direct opposite is true. It's like, well, you know, you've got to realize that you've done this and in some way do your incompetent best to atone. But forgiveness is a very, I suppose, like, God, you've revealed some things. Look, without going into the precise details, and it's just an interview time thing. It's not even like I don't feel, because I'd actually feel comfortable explaining this, but what this is what happened thing would take 10 minutes, and I don't want to take up the times of the listeners. But like, when I had to forgive someone who did something, you know, very terrible to me that resulted in me being in hospital for a very long time, when I was going through it, I thought, well, you know, just let go. Like, you know, my forgiveness was not contingent on any ideas that the person needed to change, recognize they'd done things on. It wasn't contingent on any of those things. Fundamentally, it was about, when I say it's about me, I don't mean it in a selfish sense. It's like, it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning. It's like, am I going to let this define me? Is this going to be definitive of Matthew Maloney? And the answer to that question was like, no, because, without going, the answer to that question was no. And so the next logical question I asked myself was, because, you know, there was a certain degree of reason to this, was like, well, if I hold on to this, what will happen to me as a person? So, well, you know, because what happened to you was genuinely wrong, and a rational person would fall into bitterness and resentment because what happened was wrong, and the person was a turd bag, and they actually didn't show a lot of, sorry, I don't mean to be judgmental and condemnatory, but like, it's an observation, not an, I know this sounds like right, but I genuinely mean this in the sense, and like, I'm doing my incompetent best, but like, I genuinely mean this in the sense that that's an observation, not an indictment. Like, I've let go. Fundamentally, that's what I'm talking about. Like, I let go. Like, I was sitting there in the darkness, literally and metaphorically, and thinking to myself, what are you going to do here? I thought, let go. Let go.
So then let me ask you, what does that look like? What does letting go look like? Because I've had many people tell me that because of what I do for my advocacy, that I have not let go of this. It's not about that for me, but I want to know what it is for you. What does letting go look like? I think that's important for anyone who's listening, because to let go of something, like, could be, I mean, it doesn't have to be that you accept it or that you.
You're right. That's not contingent on that. All I can say is I decided to make me, I decided that it wasn't going to define me. I realized, and it's so linked up with what you said too, again, these things are not binary opposites. It's exactly what you said to, you know, I forgave myself, because without going into precise details, they're like, I wasn't perfect. So like, so there are some things that I could have done better to potentially prevented this situation. And I thought, well, I mean, yes, that's true. But I just decided to forgive myself. Well, I suppose the first thing you need to actually do is, and it's so insightful, Kel, you need to forgive yourself. Like, you can't forgive anyone else until you forgive yourself. You need to like look at it and go, well, you know, yes, there are some things you could have done better. And yes, you could have done, could have, should have, would have. Yes, 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 yes. Hey, conceded. But you know what? Ultimately, it wasn't my fault. This thing was imposed on me. It wasn't, it wasn't something that it was imposed on me. And then, so the next rational step is to say to yourself, it's like, well, okay, will I let this define me? Will I let this, it's like, well, no. So like, okay, so that doesn't apply to me. So am I going to let what this person has done to me, am I going to let that project them on me? And am I going to hold that? Because ultimately that's a form of control. Really, really. At its heart, Cal, that's a form of control. That person still has a degree of control on you. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do. I'm just waiting to hear it from you.
Yeah, yeah. So and to just say, you know what? No.
Yeah.
And to let go.
No. And I think it's interesting you say that, because I kind of think to all those people that say you should be letting this go, I don't think I could do this work if I hadn't let it go, because it would consume me, and it would eat at me, and it would cause me a great deal of distress. But I feel like I stand quite powerfully in this space, and I think that it would be a different story completely if it was something that I had not let go of, because I couldn't have power over it, as opposed to it having power over me. That makes sense.
No, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
No. See, and again, I'm just thinking out loud here. So like,
I do a lot of it. I'm kind of worried sometimes what might pop out.
God. Well, I mean, what else can we do, Kel? What else can we do? Seriously, I'm not being ironic or flippant. What else can we do? Yeah, are we still letting these things define us? Are we still letting these things motivate us? Are we still letting these things? And, my personal answer to that question is, I don't know, maybe. Because, and it's not all bad either. Here's the kicker. Like, it's not all bad. So, like, if great things are coming from that, like what, again,
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Here, let me try, right? So
because what you're doing is awesome.
Yeah, but we get to choose that, right? We get to choose how we let our stories manifest and how we use them in our life, right? Some of us keep it separate from our life, and I'm never going to tell you how to do things, but I really believe that when we embrace our story as part of our journey, not our whole journey, we can heal from it better, and we can move with our story and with our past, right? Because it doesn't go away. All of our experience collectively, no matter what they are, whether it be traumatic or positive or happy, we have all of these things in our psyche, in our brain, and our memory, and our mind, and our bodies, right? Our bodies don't forget. You can try and intellectually separate these things and our stories from our mind, but they don't. Our bodies are always going to remember. There's no point in doing that. There's absolutely no point. When we can bring our head and our heart together and our bodies, we can actually do some deep healing work, right? And we can choose how we want to walk with our stories. We can choose how we are going to let them work into our life. They can be all-encompassing and overwhelming, right? And they can keep us kind of like locked in this cycle of abuse and trauma, and we keep attracting these wrong people and making shitty decisions and believing we're not worth it, and getting these amazing opportunities and saying, no, I'm going to sabotage that. And we can either keep allowing it to define us in that way that we never break free from this cycle, or we can choose to use that lessons in adversity and the strength and the courage that we've taken through each of those moments to go, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to change this. I've learned this from this, and now I'm going to do it this way. And now I'm going to do it this way, right? So we can pick and choose. I choose to use my story, and I've turned my pain into something I hope is powerful and is making change and has ripple effects, because that's my legacy, right?
That's somewhat of an understatement, Cal, actually, if I can jump in there and not just to throw flowers at you. But here's the thing about this.
I like flowers anyway, Matt. It's okay.
Oh man, really?
Chicken wings, prawns, and beer.
Prawns. Okay, you're ringing my bells there, but like, here's the whole thing, and this is the beautiful thing about talking to a cop about this, is because I've spoken to a lot of scientists and stuff like that, and they only really understand forensic descriptions. And see, coppers understand the distinction between a forensic description and a narrative. So when you turn up at a job, you take a forensic description of what happens, or you're taking a statement. The better example is a statement. You're sitting there taking to a person who's going, tell me what happened to you. And there's always this thing, like the person can only tell you their experience of what happened. They don't actually remember the facts. They don't remember, it's like, well, he punched me 3 times in the face, left, right, right, uppercut. No human being remembers that. And it's not just because our minds aren't video cameras. It's kind of, when it comes actually right down to it, that's actually, this is a weird thing to say, but I think you'll get it. It's actually unimportant. That's really, it's incidental. What's important is the way that you experienced it and what happened to you. So when you're taking the statement from someone, they almost never give a forensic description. They'll give the description of what happened to them. And like, we've both taken what? Tens of thousands of statements, tens of thousands together. Honestly, that would not be an exaggeration. And I don't know how many times that I've taken statements from people at the same event and they've experienced things completely differently. And they've given, like, you would read the same statement and go, you just weren't there. Like, that would not happen. Because they're not, to a forensic mind, to the materialist mind, it's like, well, that's not a forensic description. That's an inaccurate description of what happened. It's like, well, really? Really?
Yeah.
Like, and you even break it down even further when it comes down to a forensic description. It's like, we're only describing it at a certain level of like, so if you say, oh, he punched me in the face, like you're not describing it the level as like the cells in my cheek broke down and like, none of that crap matters. It's not that it's not true. It's not that it's not a forensic description. It's not that you couldn't even use it as evidence, but it's kind of, it's not important. What's important is the way the person experienced it. But see, the whole thing about that is we don't experience facts. We experience narratives. We experience events. That's so important when it comes down to understanding the psychology, the interpretation, and it even, like, it matters for everything we're talking about. It matters for, like, forgiving yourself, forgiving others, because
I guess it depends on who you are too, and how you interpret life and how you see things and how you talk about things and the type of person you are. But you're right. Like it's
about the story you tell yourself. So when you give a statement to a copper, you're going to tell that story. But you could tell yourself a different story about the same events. And it's not that it changes the events. It doesn't change what happened, but it changes how you see yourself. And to a certain degree, it actually changes the past, weirdly.
Well, it can, depending on, again, if you're talking about the stories we tell ourselves, we could spend a whole other podcast on that. But
well, let's do it.
No, we can, no worries. But we do that. We make up a lot of stories because often we don't have the answers, and so sometimes we like to.
Well, are they made up? What, really?
Well, sometimes we do. We make assumptions on information we don't always know, like
heuristics. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you kind of like, I don't know, you draw an opinion from the circumstance. Well, they must have been like this because this happened to me. And so you make up a story about the person and the reason they did it, but it could be completely irrelevant. It could be not even true. They were high on drugs. Well, no, they weren't actually. They were just really angry. We make assumptions based on their stereotypes, what our experiences are, what we think has happened, and then we make it into a story that we actually come to believe.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
And heuristics, and it depends on, fundamentally, that's a discussion about heuristics. It's like what's symbolic.
That's a big word. I just call it stories, okay?
I'm sorry. I promise never to use anything more than one syllable again in the future. It will never. Come on.
Right.
That's part of me, dude. I've read your stuff. Don't go playing the mind games with me. But like, but it really is because we live in a symbolic world. So what we're looking for is because the world is literally too complicated for us to understand. Literally. Like there's too much happening. You cannot process everything. So, I mean, if you turn up at a job and stuff like that, and someone shows a threat cue, like I said, it mightn't actually be a threat cue. There could be something else going on. But if you don't treat that like a threat cue, you're
dead.
You're an idiot. Because, like, it's good. I mean, do you have the time and capacity and everything? No, you have to act on that heuristic. You have to act on that symbol. You have to act on this, like, a preconception, because, heuristics and symbols fundamentally are linked with preconception.
Makes sense.
That's totally what's happening there. There needs to be, there is a link between your previous experience, the heuristics, and the symbol that you're going to put on that. So if you see someone with tattoos on their face who's wearing Odin's warriors wearing on their shirt, you're gonna make certain assumptions about that person.
Mm.
And if you see someone with wearing a blue shirt that's got, like, a badge on their shoulder, 3 chevrons, and Sergeant Matt Maloney written on it, you're going to make certain assumptions about that person. And they may be completely wrong, because it actually might be the case, like when it comes down to some sort of moral sense, that Sergeant Maloney is actually the dirtbag, and believe me, without going into a confessional kind of situation. Whereas the perceived.
Have some more wine, Matt.
Yeah. Is that an order? You sweet talker.
Oh, stop it.
But
mate.
no, but, like, and again, the apparent dirtbag may not be. And you see that trope in movies. It's a great movie trope that the apparent bad person is the good person, and the apparent, like, you see that reversal of things. And all that's playing on is the cycle. All that's playing on is the human psychology that, hey, you have a heuristic, it's reasonable, but it's wrong.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, look, I think we kind of try to make sense of everything, because we like to be able to control things. We like to be able to understand them, and we like to be able to make sense of the world that we're living in. And we often make up our mind about things, even if it's not quite the right thing, or not necessarily true, or, if we don't have any experience around that, or we've never had an experience like this, we try to make sense of it by putting it into a box somehow.
Well, how else are you going to navigate the world?
Exactly. And it's the same with, like, mental health and all that sort of stuff. We like to give it a label and a name, so we can make sense of it and understand it and treat it and get money for it, or whatever it is. And I don't love how that works. I really don't, but it is the way that human nature is built. And we often make assumptions about ourselves because of our behavior and those types of things, when we really understand trauma, we really understand coping, and we really understand the human condition. We get that most of the things that we do as a result of trauma is actually really natural.
Yeah.
It's actually really normal. We might act out in certain ways and we think, gosh, I could never think I was capable of that. I'm like, well, it's probably quite a reasonable explanation if you consider where you've come from. And, I guess it's about being kind to ourselves in those moments and being able to recognize them for what they are. And education is so powerful. And for anyone who is listening, I'd really love you to follow me on my social media, on my website, however you can, because I am going to be releasing some courses soon. And you've got my podcast link up there if you are a survivor. I do have a podcast called Off the Cuff with Kel, and we go into everything. It's really, we open up some pretty big conversations, and those conversations are to inform leaders and to inform survivors, and to really crack open that child abuse journey. So I'd love you to jump in to there's a membership group for the podcast, so you can get some extra content there. But essentially, I'm really trying to make a difference for adult survivors who've never really had support. And so I'll be releasing those courses soon. So join onto my mailing list. I'm not a spammer. You might get one email every 2 weeks, I promise. But there'll be some stuff coming up soon. So I'd really like to help if you are one of those people. I'm enjoying the journey. There's some support numbers on there as well. Look, it to be honest, guys, it's not easy sharing. And so if you've got people in your networks and I say that I'm used to it, but I'm not, because it usually I can clam up a couple of days afterwards. So I still have things I need to deal with. It is a lifelong journey. So I just encourage you, whoever you're speaking with in your around you, you're going to know somebody. The Australian Child Maltreatment Study just released its findings, and it's 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 guys, or 1 in 5 guys now before the age of 15 have been sexually abused. So you're going to know someone. So just be kind and caring and as safe as you can be with the people around you who are trying to share their stories. And yeah,
It was pretty deep and meaningful, wasn't it, really? And I'm sorry, towards the end there, I did breach the 80-20 rule, but that was a fascinating conversation. Please please share, jump on Kel's website, definitely worth a look. She's got some other podcasts as well, not as good as mine, even though I do CSMSF. But her podcasts really are absolutely fantastic and worth listening to. Big thanks to all the people that have liked and commented and shared. Big thanks to Kel for coming on. And I've got some more great interviews coming up already in the can. So make sure you tune in next week. If you want to come on Northern Vibe, anyone who should be coming on Northern Vibe, please don't hesitate to contact me and we'll get them on. Thank you all and see you next week.